Okay, well, folks, it's that time of month. It's the last Friday of the month, 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, and we have the pleasure of Mike McConville from Spitz to talk to us about planetarium
public relations
and various things related to that. So without further ado, Michael, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me this evening. And so what we're going to do, go ahead and share. You should be seeing I hope so. You should be seeing a PowerPoint presentation over there.
We can see it.
Perfect. All right. Well, the entirety of this evening is looking at public relations and the planetarium. One of the things that we often lose sight of is what happens inside of our dome is incredibly important. It's the reason that people come and visit us. It's the reason that planetariums exist at all. But there is a very important relationship between our domes, our facilities, the people who work in our facilities, and the communities that surround us. And how we connect to those communities goes a long way in building relationships, in helping us to gain and maintain money or grants, but it's also really important internally, having an understanding of how our planetarium fits into the bigger picture of our host institution, whether that's a museum or it's a college or university, if it's a middle or a high school. There are many, many things that tie these planetariums together. So what we want to do tonight is look over sort of the very highest levels of what public relations and the planetarium actually looks like. So what we're going to do first off is define what public relations is. And there are many things that it is not, and we'll get to those shortly. But the big way of thinking about public relations is it's about relationships. And this is a process. It's not something that you do once. It's not something that occurs for a day. It is an ongoing process that allows us to build relationships between our organization, planetarium, in the museums, the college, and the public that come through our doors. This, of course, can encompass the general public. It could encompass schools. It could very well be students and faculty at our own institutions if you work at a college or a university. But oftentimes, public relations gets lumped in with similar but not quite the same ideas. These would be things like marketing and advertising. There's the kind of pejorative term of spin, that public relations people are the ones that go out and make sure that everything sounds right, even if the situation is terrible. That being said, public relations in building relationships is going to be our communications process that we have the most control over. So when we want to build relationships, we're doing this based on the idea that if we want to market and advertise effectively, we're going to need to do so with a relationship already in our back pocket. One of the little great little imagery here is kind of giving you the idea of the difference between marketing and advertising and public relations and branding. In marketing, it's the gentleman going to the woman and telling her that he's very smart. I don't know how effective that'll be. In advertising, it's saying it over and over again. We want you to believe this. I'm smart. I'm smart. I'm smart. We don't actually know if this person is smart, but they're trying to get us to believe it. In public relations, we're banking on relationships. And so when the two women are talking to one another and she says, "Trust me, he's very smart." Now there's a level of trust. There's a relationship that's been built. And when they go back to that original person, now they have a brand. Now they have something that they can work from. I understand you're very smart. Now there's this third party that comes in that is able to provide some level of reality to all of these claims that are being made. And at its heart, this is the idea that you only have one reputation. And so the reputation of your facility, the reputation of your planetarium goes a long way. If you have a reputation for being an institution that does really great events, that connects with the community, that is something that you can go and bank on again and again. We've seen this over and over when it comes to business opportunities, where a brand will just do something that's a little off, something that will affect their reputation. And oftentimes, those are the sort of reputation killers that could sink a company, or it'll take a very, very long time for that reputation to be built back up. So always keep that in mind. What you're doing, how you're portraying your planetarium is playing into what your reputation is in the community. And it's always very important to hold that very, very close to your chest. You only have one reputation here in the industry. So when you're building relationships, it is really important to know who it is that you influence, and just as importantly, who influences you. And when you have these two pieces of information, it becomes easier for us to then go through the three steps of building these relationships and starting an effective public relations campaign. The first is to make connections. Once you've made connections between your institution, your planetarium, and someone in the community, the next most important step is to build trust. You've got to go on ahead and give people a reason to want to invest in you. And oftentimes when we focus on advertising or marketing, when there are aspects of our relationship with the community that many planetariums don't have access to, maybe your college or your museum, your own institution, they control marketing and advertising and when you get to be on a billboard, or if you do a radio spot, or if you go to talk on TV. Public relations encompasses all of that and then some. It is relationships at the personal level, it's relationships at the corporate level, and everything in between requires the trust that you create. And so when we do good work, when we follow through, when we produce shows that people love, all of these things help to build trust that we get to work with as time goes on. Once we've built that trust and we maintain that trust, we go on ahead and, more importantly, maintain our relationships. You start the relationship, you build the trust, and you maintain it. It works for romantic and emotional relationships. It works for planetariums too. This is pretty common sense stuff. But when we're talking about public relations and we're trying to figure out what planetariums really need to do, there's a very, very important question to ask. It's very straightforward, and it kind of gets to the visceral, deeply emotional connection that most of us have with our domes. And it's the question of what keeps you up at night? What are the things about your institution, about your facility specifically, that cause you to pause, that give you reason to step back and worry? And these are the sorts of things that a good public relations campaign can help to solve. So if at your facility, what keeps you up is your lack of attendance, or an issue with funding, or the age of your equipment, all of these things are essential pieces of knowledge if we're going to move forward and effectively put together a public relations campaign for your planetarium. So we've been using this word over and over again. At the heart of public relations is the campaign. The campaign is this long-term, multifaceted process that gets us the sorts of results that we're looking for. And to be effective, these campaigns have to be three things. They have to be coherent, they have to be consistent, and they have to be comprehensive. When these three things come together and we enter into a public relations campaign with these three things in mind, we're going to be much, much better off. We're doing a lot of research at the front end to make sure that we are prepared as the campaign goes on. And so looking at this campaign, what do we need to know to make this campaign work? We've got to ask a few questions. And this is where you and your staff, or you, if you're on your own in your facility, this is probably an easy thing to do. You want to answer a few questions to give you some focus as to what your first campaign or your first few campaigns should do. These questions would be like, what would we like to accomplish? What is the end goal of this campaign? Who is our target audience? If it's funding, are we going to be talking to donors? If it's attendance, are we talking to the community? If we wanted to raise the attendance in school shows, our target audience shouldn't be 18 to 24-year-olds in college. What it should be would be mom bloggers and teachers and homeschool groups and private school groups and the school board and the superintendent. This is a coherent and cohesive audience that allows us to focus our work into areas where we actually get some benefit. We also want to get an idea of what is the call to action. What do we want people to do? We know what our final process is going to look like. We know what we would like our final product to be, but we also need to give our audiences a reason to engage with us. And all of this together is part of a larger question of how do we want to be portrayed? How do we want to take our planetarium and have it portrayed to the public? This is a great opportunity for those planetarians who may be taking over a new dome, or you have new administration, there's new people in charge. And often in those times, we get a reassessment of what we're going to do, how we're going to move forward on these sorts of things. And this is a great opportunity to get these campaigns in place and to get these questions answered. One of the very effective ways of finding out these answers is using what we would call the SWOT matrix. For those of you who have been in sort of larger institutions, especially those of you who have been in the private sector before, you may be familiar already with SWOT. And it is a research step that looks to investigate 4 major aspects of your facility: its strengths, its weaknesses, its opportunities, and its threats. These 4 questions, these 4 categories, we can fill out and get a much better idea about what we're facing, how our campaign is meant to be put together by looking at how our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats play out. For public relations, this is a key piece of information. If you want to make decisions that allow your campaigns to be effective, we need to know strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. One of the easiest ways to look at the SWOT matrix is in a 2x2 chart. It is the helpful and harmful aspects, the things that will help us achieve our campaign objective, the things that would be harmful to achieving that objective, and then where the origins of these things come from. So if you have something that is helpful and internal, say you have excellent staff, that is an internal strength. If you have a large donor base, or you're in an area, say, for example, around San Francisco, you have a place where there might be a lot of money, or at least a lot of money in technology, that is an external opportunity. But we can also have our internal harmful aspects. Those are going to be our facilities' weaknesses. And then, of course, there are the threats. And these threats can be anything from, there's another planetarium in our area. We're 25 minutes away from a planetarium, and we have to compete for public attendance. We have to compete for school group attendance. These can also be threats as certain times, if this was 2008 or 2009, one of these external threats would be, we're in a recession. There is limited discretionary income for people. And for certain places that might require or rely more heavily on sort of public audiences, that can be a problem. These may be an aspect of where people may not spend the money that they no longer have. And then as the economy gets better, we can have a little bit more discretionary income to use. What this means is that we've got to think about our strengths and our weaknesses broadly. But more importantly, the opportunities and the threats have to be thought of broadly. What is every opportunity that we have available to us? How, in the way that our planetarium connects with our facility, with the outside community, what opportunities do we have? Let's think big. And threats, let's think bigger as well. We want to find the things that help us mitigate our weaknesses, the things that minimize the threats while maximizing our internal strengths and our external opportunities. And so getting back to the 3 C's of campaigns, the first thing is that campaigns are coherent. And one of the through lines here is going to be the metaphor of the puzzle. All of the puzzle pieces need to fit together. And if you're looking at the puzzle pieces over there on the right side, you can tell that they do all fit together. You want to use the right tools for the right job. If you're trying to get that last piece to fit, you're not going to put an edge piece. That's not going to fit properly. You want to use the piece that is designed to fit into that slot. And what that really allows us to do is say, well, if we want to focus on increasing public attendance, one of the tools we might not want to use is a fundraiser for a small group of people. That is a good tool, but it's not the right tool. In this, we're trying to get clarity of vision. We want to have a real solid understanding of what it is that we want to do. If we know that we're going to need a hammer and a screwdriver and a saw, we shouldn't go into this job with a wrench and a router and a Dremel tool. We may be able to get something to work, but it's much, much easier if we know the tools we need at the very, very beginning of the campaign. If you've got a coherent campaign, now you want a consistent campaign. You want to make sure that all the puzzle pieces that you're using are coming from the same puzzle. Now, the puzzle pieces might fit together, but if you've got 3 different puzzles, it's going to look wrong. It's not going to be the puzzle and the end product that you want. So here, we're talking about keeping communication styles consistent. How we communicate things should remain the same. That's where the consistency comes in. This is how we allow what we're communicating to really be the centerpiece of our campaign. We are very, very good at social media, and we do emails. Well, we don't really do newsletters, and we're not going to do a YouTube video. Why spend resources on something that we know is not going to be terribly effective, that isn't going to be all that appealing to our target audience, but the way that we approach this subject? This is a little bit where marketing and advertising can come in. We want to be consistent in things like fonts and color schemes. We want people to be able to tie all of these pieces together over and over and over again. This gives our audiences, and that word we're going to use very broadly, these audiences, whether they be the people we want in our domes or the people we want funding our domes or the people we need to support our domes, all of those things together need to work from the same puzzle. They should all be consistent in how we're going to be utilizing them. And then the final C is that campaigns need to be comprehensive. One of the downfalls of many campaigns is a focus on too few things. We know that one change at a planetarium can affect many, many other aspects of our facility. And so we've got the right pieces, we're using the right tools, we're being consistent, but we also need to make sure that this is a complete puzzle. It's great if you've got a 1,000-piece puzzle, but if there's one piece missing, you're going to remember the one piece that's missing and not the 999 that are there. And these are the sorts of things that really force all of us, when we're putting together these campaigns, to think about how one change or one idea or one concept at our facility can affect everything else. This is probably best thought of as you're trying to anticipate all of the problems and then try to mitigate those problems. One great example of this might be that you want to increase school show attendance at your dome. And how you would approach that should be pretty straightforward. Let's go and talk to team leaders, or we'll send an email or a letter, or we'll visit schools and we'll see the teachers and we'll talk about our curriculum and how it fits with state standards or national standards in that sense. But it's also, you're bound to get a homeschool group that wants to come in, or a private school group that's heard about that. And it may not necessarily be about changing your curriculum to fit somebody's needs as much as we don't have the same resources that a public school might have. What can you offer us? And understanding that, anticipating that, allows you to have a far more effective campaign when all is said and done. It's anticipating the needs of say, special education classes. If we have students that come to our domes who might be on the autism spectrum, if we have a curriculum available to them that is very tactile, we have a show that's a little bit quieter, we don't have a lot of background music. It's a situation where instead of having 120 or 150 students at once, we might only have 15 or 20. And we can have a little bit more intimate time in the dome that is perfect for that group, that may not necessarily be what the average group is going to take. So it's anticipating all of these possibilities and building in your campaign ways to be able to approach those contingencies. So we're putting this campaign together. And in doing so, it's a fairly straightforward process. One of the nice things about public relations is that in the field of communications, it really is considered a science. Doing it once is going to be great for the second time you do it, and it's going to be the same the 10th time you do it. This is the process that we can use over and over again to go and attack certain issues that may be affecting our domes. So if you've got your answers, what do we need to do? How do we need to approach this? Who are we trying to talk to? You want to collect those answers and get a foundation in place. Put together a blueprint of what you need. This is what we have. This is what we would like to see at the very end. And this is how the process should play out. Then you're kind of getting into the business side of this. And this is a cost-benefit analysis that doesn't have to work just on currency. This is cost and benefit of what is the time that we're going to put into this? What is the human ask? How many hours are we going to have to do additionally for our presenters, for our technicians, for our programmers, for if you're a director and you have people underneath you? How do we put all of this together? And is that worth the benefit? If we spend X amount of time working on a campaign for school shows, will the Y benefit pay off? So we're looking at returns on investment. It isn't just about money. It's about the time and the relationship. Can I build a massive amount of trust? Can I build many positive relationships for a very small cost? That's a great thing. If we're going to put in a lot of time and effort and get very little back, you want to be able to know that at the very beginning. And then probably the most difficult side of all of this is bringing staff and administration on board. Inside your own dome, that may be very, very easy, but the higher you get up the ladder, the farther it reaches into your community, the more and more people you're going to run into who may have questions. They're going to want some level of control over this. They're going to want to know what's happening with all of this. And it's a great chance to not only bring out a campaign that works, that's coherent and comprehensive and complete, but it's an additional opportunity for us to build relationships. We're making those connections. And the first time those connections are made and the first time that that trust is built, that's something that's going to keep giving on and on. The work you put into the first campaign doesn't disappear when you move on to your second or your third or your fourth problem. Those relationships and those the trust that's built in those times is something that's going to pay off again and again and again as we're moving forward. So of course, this is a very, very high level view of how public relations in the planetarium can work. We're not public relations professionals. There are people that get paid lots of money to do this for a living. We've got many, many other things on our plate. But demystifying some of the issues behind how public relations works and how we can incorporate it into our facilities gives us a little bit more control, a little bit more agency to make decisions that we think are in the best interest of our planetariums. And so that brings at least this part of our presentation to a close. And so we'll move this over to the questions and answer. And Alan, I know we will bring this one down so that we can do the recording for the second part.
Okay, yeah,